Oh, you made
Hello.
it.
And John. Hi, John.
Hi, John.
Hiya.
Hello.
What are you eating, Helen?
Risotto.
I'll put you on the big screen here. Let's see. That's more like it.
Kate. Hello, Kate Brown.
Hello, Francis Corkey.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to meet you too. Thanks for the invite.
Okay. So everyone can see. There we are. But Caroline can see you now as well.
Hi,
Hello,
Caroline.
everyone. We have to start now with okay. Everyone has been muted so that we can actually get into the event. So ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nnorom Osandu Azuonye, and I'm the Publishing Director of SPM Publications. And we're here today to celebrate our authors, Francis Corkey Thompson, Phil Vernon, and Anne Osborne. Three exceptional, fantastic writers who won our 2018 Sentinel Poetry Book Competition. It's an amazing thing to actually hold and read these books. They come from places that you can only imagine. They will thrill you, they will challenge you, they will excite you when you read them. And if you've read the review of the three books by Mandy Pannett, we just came out in this past week, I'm sure you'll be, itching to get the book if you have not already had them. So I'm not going to spend too much time as an introduction. It's just for people who are not aware of what we do. Every year we run a poetry book competition where the authors submit their works anonymously, and the judges have to pick the best three of the lot. The fantastic thing about this is we have been able to get people that, like the winner of the previous year, Molly Donachi. I was surprised when we finally had her as a winner, and it turned out to be an 85-year-old, and it was her first book. It was fantastic. I really felt very proud. At that age, a lot of people would have, stopped writing or stopped pushing themselves, but she was still there, pushing and writing fantastically. And this is the kind of thing you will experience when you read these books. And if you go back and see the other winners from the previous years, you'll be really, really excited. We are giving everybody an opportunity to build more literature. And today, we are going to go straight into the readings tonight. And we are going to have our first prize winner, Francis, to read first of all. And then we'll move over to Phil Vernon, who won the second prize, and then Anne Osborne with the third prize, Mock Orange. Francis, you got the floor.
Thank you. I've just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Thank you very much. And welcome all the people that I know and all the people that I don't know to this really special occasion. Thanks to everybody involved. My first poem is set in the country that I come from. It's set in Ireland. It's set in the north part of Ireland, County Derry, and it's set in the south part of County Derry, where my dad's family came from. It's written in the present tense, but it's referring to something that might have happened about 70 odd years ago. Well, it's fashionable these days to write about history in the present tense. If anybody who's into Hilary Mantel and so on, people like that will be aware. And the other author I want to reference is Philip Pullman. My granddaughters are fond of his Dark Materials, and I've been watching it on telly as well. The notion of the city of Oxford and multiple worlds all existing at the same time in the same place, but no contact between them. A little bit like this poem, the setting of this poem in South Derry, 2 worlds, 2 populations in Northern Ireland, separate populations living under the same sky, surrounded by the same trees and fields, but scant, if any, contact between them. And the other thing I need to say about it is my grandmother was born in Greece, brought up in Greece, and then married a Presbyterian minister from Derry, and all of her adult life until she died at 93 was spent in Northern Ireland. She never went back to Greece. Okay, sorry about rambling on about it, but that's the background to this and a couple of other poems that I may read. Afternoon tea with Mrs. Clark. My grandmother, knowing Greek, ancient and modern, is invited to take tea with Mrs. Clark. That's the Mrs. Clark, from Clarks of Derry, makers of fine shirts. Here comes Granny, all frizz and hairpins, bustling along the lane they call Nancy's Kesh, where in a tree a boy is hunkered, cocking an ear for silences and echoes. Maybe the country lad touches a forelock. More likely they don't see each other at all. She's a crow flapping over his turf. He's as common as the grass. But imagine they talk. Say she offers him tales of wine-dark seas and lemon groves. Say he gives her his place of still water, Annahorish, not a mile away, the worth of it still unwakened in him. They are only a wavelength apart in the lane. The one about to launch his own waves on the world. The other hugging hers forever inward, sidestepping Derry mud, hurrying to take tea with Mrs. Clark. Well, I hope that made sense to you, and I hope the slightly oblique reference to the late great Seamus Heaney wasn't lost on people. From Derry now to the county of Tyrone, which is where my earliest memories are. My dad was the minister in Garvita, Manse, and we lived in the townland of Garvita. I'm casting my mind back 100 years before my own childhood now, or maybe 200 years before that as well. I'm imagining a child at primary school, as I was at primary school in Garvita. But the difference was that in those far off days, the child that I am imagining would have been beaten at school for speaking her own language. Now, of course, it's quite the thing to learn the Irish language, which is great. And I should just mention that most place names have, many place names in Ireland and in Ulster have Irish origins and meanings. And if you're not brought up in the relevant culture, you haven't a clue what the meanings actually are. Garvita. The child knew how the naming of that place conjured birch or a foxhole or home. But she must gabble the new gibberish English, with only the small body of herself to rock in the long ride till home time, and she's gone. Garvita was my place too. I knew where snowdrops grew, and the well by the white gates, and the kitchen rayburn where toes were toasted. Bright as its name, Garvita was home. I knew it, and I did not know it. Thrashed hands and chilled bare feet leave no trace. Snow gives the lie to the land so that the fox forgets where to sniff. Through glass, we notice it nosing the patio. We ourselves have taken to sniffing for the old language, but without the body memory of the bent backs of brave, bag-aproned women. We are mouthing these fruity new forkfuls as if there was no tomorrow or yesterday. Oh, it's very strange reading out into silence. No idea. You can't read the room anymore. Oh well, here we go. This is, oh, thank you. Still, this is by way of introducing myself as much as anything, dwelling on where I come from for the first few poems that I'm reading. The other thing is, I forgot to keep an eye on time. So Nnorom, maybe you could let me know when I have a couple of minutes to go. Could you do that somehow? Oh, okay.
I will let you know.
Yeah. Thank you. This one's called Loch Ness. And you probably know that Loch Ness is the great big lake, great big hole right in the middle of Ulster, caused way back at the time when Finn McCool shoved his hand into the ground, dug out a sod of the earth to chuck it at his enemy, a giant across the sea. And it fell short, fell into the Irish Sea. And that, of course, is the Isle of Man, just in case you were not aware of that. Just put that background for you. It has been known that human beings have inhabited the shores of Loch Ness since way before pre-recorded history. So I've just tried to, I used to go a lot to Loch Ness shores and I loved it. It touches most of the counties of Northern Ireland. And I knew it's midges in the summertime. And a strange thing happened when I was just trying to describe Loch Ness. By the way, it's on page 33 if somebody's looking for it. Somebody entered the poem, and don't know who it is, but there she is. You'll see. Loch Ness. Chill like a human shiver, the loch told its people of trout or eel and called the weather in from beyond the hills. In the tight living between hunger and enough, between sex and death, they made fire. Fire saw them through the shortest, most perilous days. It centered their minds, blackened faces. They would surf it and celebrate, and some knew when to let life go and how to. But the woman, dulled with damage, survived to see tree and cloud lie clean on the loch's face, and the midges multiply to a haze in its bushy inlets. Then she would creep and stoop to place yellow water flowers in the earth above her child, and sing to it, sing out its secret name, though it not hearing. From the loch she would come in the morning, her long hair flashing, her body white.
Thank you, Francis. And we will now go to Phil Vernon.
Was that 10 minutes?
We're timing this. No, you're coming back to read anyway. So just managing the time properly. So Phil Vernon.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So thanks, Nnorom. Thanks, Francis, as well. That was lovely. I obviously drew the short straw if I was to read just after you, but I'll do my best. And like Francis, I'd just like to welcome everybody that I know and don't know. Nice to see some familiar faces, or if not faces, names. I'm going to try and read 5 poems in my first 10 minutes till I get tugged off the stage by Nnorom. The first one is the title poem of the book, which is called Poetry After Auschwitz. And this starts off with an epigram, if you like, which is something I overheard at a poetry reading once, where someone, I don't know why they were there, said poetry is pointless, it's like kicking a stone. It stuck in my mind. Poetry After Auschwitz. At the start and the end of this long, straight road, a silent child, a house in flames, a leafless tree, an empty town. He kicks a stone to watch it leap and skitter on the flattened clay, then slow and stall and go to ground. Along the forest edge stand those he's failed to save. He sings his song, his unknown patrons hear no sound, and yet he feels their silence deep beneath his feet and sees beyond the tree, the child, the house, the town. So that's one with perhaps a heavy title and perhaps a slightly more positive ending. This one, I'm afraid, is quite heavy. It's called 1955. And this poem comes with a note, which I'll just read out, which is, it's written in memoriam, a certain Richard Langridge, who was a farmer in Kent. And as a lieutenant in the British Army, he helped liberate Belsen concentration camp in 1945. But it was on his farm in Kent that myxomatosis, that awful man-made rabbit disease, or man-introduced rabbit disease, was introduced to the UK in 1953. And 2 years later, he killed himself. He shot himself, by which time the number of rabbits in Britain had declined by 95%. And I'm sure many of you, like me, have seen plenty of rabbits dying of myxomatosis. It's pretty awful. 1955, in memoriam, Richard Langridge. Magpies love a rabbit halfway dead, to peck its weeping eyes, disdain the rest, then nonchalantly pause and lift their heads, hop down and pick their way along the veil of pain, to blind and leave undead the next. Romans loved rabbits too. Their settlers sailed with does and bucks as well as laws and peace. We love them less. We've placed them on a trail where gun-green birds glint in the April sun, imperious at their casual charnel feast. We met the halfway dead, half hidden among the dead, as we advanced towards Berlin. I lift the stricken rabbits one by one, take cover from their blank and aimless stare, then break their necks and set them down within the shadowed margins of the coppice where last autumn's leaves lie cold and half decayed. The magpies scatter, but they reappear. I'm tired of asking if this horror show would have me save or kill to save. And as I watch myself deal every blow, if Romans' clearer view of dying made them kinder, perhaps the feasting magpies know. And this one is called Foreign Correspondent. Perhaps rather strangely, it's a sonnet, strangely because of the subject matter. And it might be helpful to think of Rwanda when you hear this poem. It starts off with the uplands, which is the uplands of Central Africa. Foreign Correspondent. The uplands deadened him the more, where people neatly laid in rows, called louder than in other wars, by simple geometry. He closed his ears, but year on year, the song joined whispers from elsewhere, to drown the voice insisting we prolong our lives. He hears no music now. Daybreak unrolls. Without a sound, the empty landscape is unmasked. The wind has dropped, and far from sea, the gulls fly quiet above the town. How wide the space between what passed and what he told of tragedy. That's the Foreign Correspondent. This is, next one is a kind of a love poem. It's called The Sop, and it refers to the sop, the hunk of bread which Jesus Christ dipped in soup and then offered to Judas Iscariot and said to him, "That thou doest, do quickly." And it's written as if it's in the voice of Judas. You liked to walk alone in the warm, dark wind and slow your heart to beat in measured time. "Come too," you said that night. "We'll take the wine. I'd like your views on how the movement's grown and what the coming days will bring." We passed the dogs and left the homes and murmured dialogues behind, and paced the quiet lanes where branches interlaced but failed to shield us from the frailty and ache and weight of night's vast dome. "It's only you I trust to help me free them from the steady drip of alkali which calcifies compassion in a lie," you said, "because alone among them all, your love of truth exceeds your love for me." I felt the breeze abruptly fall, and then your fingertips upon my hand as with taut tenderness you shared your plan to leave us violently. What I would do. Above us in the trees an owl called. The day we met, my soul was damned. The thing you tasked me with, I carried through. At once I fell, leaves fell, night fell. I'm lost with no horizons nor relief. Because my love of truth exceeds my love for you? Do I have time for one more, Nnorom?
Yes, you've only been on 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll make this, I'll read this very slowly. So this last one I'll read in this segment. So that was a love poem, an old love poem. Obviously, in our love lives, we have moments of stony silence. At least I do. This poem emerged from a period of stony silence one evening. And fortunately, the stony silence came to an end shortly afterwards. But it's written as though in the voice of one of the interpreters from the summit which took place in Paris in 1960 between the USSR and the USA. And it was a summit which unfortunately was taking place after Khrushchev had made a personal visit to the USA. I didn't know this until I researched this poem. Khrushchev had made a personal visit and spent 2 or 3 weeks in the USA, I guess visiting friends or something, and dropped it in the White House for a non-official visit at the end of his stay. And apparently the signs were somewhat Thor-like. I shouldn't exaggerate. But then just after that, the U-2 plane, spy plane, was shot down over the Soviet Union with the pilot Gary Powers in it. And unfortunately, that took place just before this planned summit in Paris. So this poem's called Interpreting, and it's in the voice of one of the US interpreters. We had little to do at first, except avoiding one another's eye with manufactured hurt. As one of the Russians quietly remarked, translating stony silences is harder than you'd think. When Khrushchev demanded Ike apologize for what was practically an act of war, Ike made like nothing had been said, though we'd all heard it had, and I'd repeated it, so I was sure. But Khrushchev wouldn't let it go. It was yet more proof he couldn't trust the West, so what was the point of this? Then Ike said we'd have no choice because we can't trust you. And so the summit went, an injured silence interspersed with versions of it's all your fault, until the Soviets said that's that and quit the room, and Paris too. I heard all both sides said out loud, said half of it myself in fact, but cannot say if either asked himself how his opponent felt, nor how to help him help make this all right.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And we'll continue to enjoy our evening with reading by Anne Osborne from Mock Orange. To find Anne.
I've unmuted myself. Thank you, Nnorom. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. It's great to see you all. My first poem is about my grandmother, Winnie. Winnie walks all the way to town and back to get the pig's head free from the butcher's on South Shore. The kitchen stinks from boiling. Her hands are red from picking the meat off the cheek. The secret tin hidden under the stairs. Her escape fund won't get her far, Fleetwood, if she's lucky. Shite on the massive pants that she boils in the dolly tub, ruining the day she ever married him. She wrings them, feeds them through the mangle. When he was younger, he could hear a pebble drop on Morecambe Beach before the war to end all wars made him deaf as mutton and Winnie's words fell. And then the next poem is about my mother, aged 13, Winnie's daughter. Suffocating. The cheap stench of privet and Mrs. Baldwin's perfume as she pulls the lanky girl bosomwards and cuddles her tight. The girl knows she's welcome round there in the blackouts, but dark men hide in Mrs. Baldwin's coal shed. Spied on. Mr. Swithenbank on the other side watches her skipping out back over the waist-high hedge that looks onto the handkerchief lawn. He likes her long legs and curls. Not much else to see yet, or touch. Skint. Her father has drunk the money again, all of Winnie's wages, no leg of lamb for tea. The deaf old bugger sits alone at the head of his table, king of all that he surveys. Brawn, bread and butter. He mutters at the wall. And so I was intrigued when I read many years ago that a little girl has the eggs in her ovaries before she's born that give rise to the next generation. And so this little poem is half of me, because when Winnie worked in a fish and chip shop in Blackpool and she was expecting, half of me was there. Half of me thinks that I can hear the muffled sound of a trombone, except of course I have no ears. I'm just a jot of protoplasm, merely a dot. So where did the other half of me come from? This is my father when he was young. Pick them off like so many crows. Brill-creamed hair, just 18. My father is cutting the grass in his shirt sleeves. He sweats as he marches up and down, a green striped baize behind him. Japanese forces overrun Luzon, take Manila. His stepbrother Frank, shot dead in the Norwegian Sea, watches from the shade of the copper beech tree. Germany pushes the 8th Army back to the Gazala line just west of Tobruk. The barges move silently along the canal beyond the gate at the bottom of the garden. The silver underside of raspberry leaves, cabbage whites flit. It is midsummer. This poem is about a trip that my father and I had out onto the moor where we lived when I was little. This is in Yorkshire, on Belden Moor. With my father on the moor, I'm conjuring a snowstorm. The first white flakes stroke my face as we walk across the Druid plain just below Dubrudden. The sky, grey glass, is humming a blizzard dance. Faster and faster the crystals sting. Down there the village vanishes, paths snuffed out by snow. The moor is going to sleep now. Cotton grass, larks, gainer on horseback, the celandines by the stream, etched, smothered, gone. My moment of sorcery begins to burn, cannot turn us back to thickets of snow-free bracken, bobtails in the quarry, ancient writing on stone. There are snowflakes on my eyelashes. I hold my father's hand, grip the wool of his black overcoat, long to be carried home. He clasps my mittened fingers. Together we run down the slopes, the snow ankle high until breathless we reach the Blackstone Bridge as the whiteout takes hold. And this poem is, thank you, Sarah, from later on in our lives. My father begins to talk. Valentines are diesel. They have starting problems. Crusaders are fine to drive, but carry only a 2-pound gun. Shermans have an aeroplane engine. They sit higher. The Germans call them Tommy cookers. The power traverse must be checked before moving forward. It can freeze in cold weather. In Holland, movement is restricted by canals and ditches. It is helpful and often necessary to test ditches for the hidden enemy with short bursts of machine gun fire. So I'm a botanist. I've written a lot about plants and about understanding the natural world. And this drew me to be very interested in Linnaeus, the father of modern taxonomy. And Linnaeus was trying to make sense of the world around him by studying plants. And this poem's called Linnaeus Goes into Lapland. Linnaeus goes into Lapland. He rides through the north gates in his kit bag, inkhorn pen case, gauze to protect against flies. Snow deepens on moss and lichen. He sleeps beneath a reindeer skin. It is 7 days to Sorcerer. In the marshes he sees a pink-flowered shrub anchored far out, water up above her roots. He calls her bog rosemary, Andromeda polyfolia, presses her between the pages of Flora Uplandica. Outside Gemotis, his first view through a gap in the hills of the Lapland fells, he notes how the pregnant gadfly craves the reindeer, longs to get under her skin. Heavy hail. In a lap tent, birch-framed, covered with cloth, 16 naked laps sit eating reindeer whey. A brass-bangled woman, smoke-blackened face, dances before them. Night is as light as day. He eats, drifts like snow into sleep. In the snow blossoms Saxifraga stellaria, Rhododendron laponicum. Climbing up from Quickjock, he sees a shadow of a plant too tall to be empetrum, leaves more divided than lily of the valley. He greets her, names her Cassiope, sister to Andromeda. On the heights of Valaver, where the air is nothing and midwinter snow stifles summer, he finds a child's rock garden. No road, no track, no human habitation, summer driven to the deepest valleys. At the highest point, he sorts, classifies, describes by the light of the midnight sun. At the watershed below the foothills, a cowherd tends to his cattle. Cold rocks melt into sweet wild strawberries, clover. Do I have time for one more, Nnorom, or is
Yes,
that?
please. One more.
So this poem was inspired by Carol Ann Duffy's The World's Wife. And this is Mrs. Linnaeus's perspective. Mrs. Linnaeus. It was late September. I'd just put the little one to bed when he comes back from his Arctic trip, stinking of reindeer shit, blowing that damn bugle like there was no tomorrow. He throws his kit bag down on the table, puts his feet up, starts telling me stories of Jamotis, Quickjock, Sorcerer, the Lap who tried to drink seawater. Oh, how they all laughed. I used to love those days in the summer when he would take me through the north gates, so to speak, and out into the meadows, feed me mead made from mountain honey. Now he's become a pain in the arse, sends his students off around the world, collecting cocoa, banana, cassava, thinks they'll grow here, Sweden, imagine it, thinks he'll save us all from starvation. I didn't have the heart to tell him about Darwinian adaptation. Half of his students have died of tropical diseases or sunk with ships, including that poor boy Tilland. And I'm the one that the wives come to when they want to vent. The house is full of dead plants, insects, ants from exotic places, remnants of reindeer dung.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne, for that beautiful reading. Now, I just sent a message in the chat to everyone. I know some people are leaving. At least we've had 3 people leave. And in case you're not staying till the end, you have that address in case you want to buy one of the books if you haven't already got them. It would be nice if you buy all 3. Watching the Door, Poetry After Auschwitz, and Mock Orange. Okay, now, well, the next thing we have on the program is a little commentary, so to say. I think excerpts as well from the review she wrote about the books. So Mandy Pannett is going to talk to us about the books that we are launching today. Mandy, if you unmute yourself.
Yes, I think I have.
Okay.
I'm unmuted.
So just in case, for those who don't know Mandy, she has been a great friend of Sentinel Poetry Movement for many years. And she was the poetry editor of Sentinel Literary Quarterly for more than 5 years. And she is the author of some different poems, poetry books. I think she has like 6 collections and 2 novellas, including The Onion Stone and the there's a recent one. What's that one? The Wolf Enigma. Yeah, the Wolf Enigma. I was, forgetting that title. Okay, so anyway, Mandy has been very kind to read the 3 books and laid her own meanings and interpretations to them. And every one of us, including the poets, have loved the review. And we'll just listen to her and what she has to say about the books today. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you, Nnorom. And the lovely readings, everybody. I'm looking forward to some more beautiful selection of poems. It's been a great pleasure to read these books. I really love it. I love all of them, and I'm not just saying that. But before I say any more about those, I must just say, I think I did say this in the overview, how much, well, congratulate Nnorom really and Sentinel Publications for yet again 3 lovely looking books. All of the Sentinel publications, and I've got lots of them, obviously including my own all the Invisibles, and they are all top-notch quality, beautiful paper, beautiful typesetting, and fantastic covers. I mean, I just keep looking at them, these particular three. They're really, really lovely. When I read the books, when Nnorom asked me to write about them, I kind of, the first thing I did when I read them all separately, of course, first, I tried to find some similarities, and obviously they are, all these three poets have sort of, they've come together by a quirk of fate, or whatever you like to call it, destiny, to be prize winners in this particular competition, in this particular year, or 2018, or whenever it was. And they've all got, you know, absolutely fantastic imaginations and sense of originality, and obviously a real love of words. Like that comes over so well, and also I imagine a great enjoyment in the craft of poetry, in getting exactly the right word and the right stanza break and all those things. And all of them, one quality that I admired in all of them is the layering. I think, you know, you can read these and then read them again, their poems, and find something more each time. That is a real skill, I think, to do the layering in a poem without it becoming too obvious. Very subtle skill. But then I kind of looked for some of the particular differences, that what makes each of the three poets unique. Like, sounds a bit mercenary, but each one has a unique selling point. And I just made a few notes. So and again, all these things are my personal opinion, and interesting to see what other people say about books. What I loved in Anne's book Orange is the lovely blend of the poet and the scientist, as she followed her plants, their origin and their journey, and also the language. Anne's language struck me as very clear, very precise. And what I particularly liked in Anne's is the way they complicated subjects, but she makes them sort of simple. And I think Anne herself has said something, she likes making sense out of complexity. And I thought that was really interesting. And I love the poems, memory and nostalgia, and very profound themes, but with a very light touch on many occasions. And I really love the narrative elements, the Linnaeus poems. I'm very glad, Anne, that you read that Linnaeus Goes to Lapland, or whatever. That's such a beautiful poem. I love the images too. I feel, I might be wrong in this, but I feel you're quite an imagist poet, Anne. Frances, I felt, was searching for the essence of things, the uniqueness, the kind of, like Hopkins, the inscape of things. Wonderful memories and anecdotes, also a strong sense of nostalgia. And I really love the way, Frances, you make connections between things. In particular, I think I mentioned that poem about Lucy, the fossils of Lucy, and how you've juxtaposed a few relics, a few bones, the idea of a few ancient bones with someone in modern times in a hospital waiting for news on an emergency, and both the narrator and Lucy are, there's a sense of emergency. They know fear and they know what it is to worry, I suppose. I also love Francis's metaphors and extended images, and I noticed, well, I noticed anyway, a sort of a sense of fable in some of the poems, a sense of folklore, which really appealed to me. And Phil's, now I'm very, very intrigued by Phil's. I think I hope you're going to talk a bit more about the title, Phil, and your choice of the title, and the reason for the quotation that after Auschwitz, all poetry, all writing is barbaric. And then in the poem you read, you talked about poetry being pointless, or you heard the comment, poetry is pointless, like kicking a stone. And it seemed to me your book is a kind of a balance between these two opposing points of view, the barbaric and the pointless, and you're bringing things together. I thought that was so amazingly clever. And I love you have this simplicity and complexity, like the other two poets do, which is so interesting. And there's undercurrents, like in that poem, My Weather Girl, the undercurrent of violence. And I loved all the questions in it. I kind of at one point felt the whole collection was one big question, asking us questions and not giving answers, but just posing questions. And I loved your use of rhyme, of course, and so clever. Nnorom, have I got time just to read a couple of tiny extracts from each one? Nnorom, obviously, muted. I'd like to I had to, well, I didn't have to, but I wanted to choose one poem from each writer that I really liked, and that was very difficult. In fact, I got around it by mentioning a few others. But one I really like from Anne's, and I can't pronounce the title, I'm afraid, Anne. It's the one set in Anglesey, page 24. Thank you. And there's a part which follows the description of a photograph with two little girls holding hands by a circle of roses. Beyond the garden, the Menai Straits, Bell Heather on Puffin Island, guillemots, razorbills, cormorants bed down in sea lavender, blankets of common elder, South Stack, skerries, Holyhead. I tend the light. I am my sister's keeper. And I'm glad Phil read The Sop, because that was one of my favorites. But then I have chosen an extract from his poem, Flax, page 79. I felt the touch of those whose bulks of timber dragged these lanes, who knew the cloying scent of mayweed, clover, drove the horses pastured in these intimate enclaves to till and sow. I wondered how this path we trod on began, saw William on his horse lean forward to negotiate his need, their right to walk and rent and plough the land he'd won with those he'd won it from. And Francis, I'm really sorry. I've chosen your poem Perspective 1, but in the review, perhaps Norman, you'll be able to alter it. I called it The Process, which is the preceding poem. This is Perspective 1, page 65. And just a short bit, but I think it's just so beautiful. and I find that my hard surfaces are scored with you. You are crystal in my stone. Belfast buses and Devon walls carry your name, and the wind builds you out of dust. Well done, all of you. Lovely books. I urge everybody to buy all 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Very lovely. And I have to say, it's good news. A lot of people that have been here have actually been going to the website and buying the books. So that's a good outcome. And I hope that everybody gets the opportunity to read these books and actually gift them to people. I have, decided, I've made a list of people that I'm going to gift these books personally to. They're just fantastic. And so we're going to do some more reading in reverse order this time. So Anne will come first and do some reading, and then Phil, and then we'll finish off the reading sections with Francis. And then we'll throw the floor open for anyone who has a question or a comment, and just a bit of interactive session to end the evening with. So Anne, fire away.
Thank you. I've got one long poem and one very, very, very short poem. And these poems about my father, aged 90. So moving on a bit. Blue Flash. My father has decided to go on the internet. BT has an offer on. It closes in May. But what about my money? Oh dear, oh bloody hell. Why am I going on the internet? Because it's a big encyclopedia, Dad. You can find out anything, and you don't have to do internet banking. He nods, says slowly, I think what I need is a Kit Kat. The man from BT didn't install the router, just left it. Oh bloody hell, said Dad when I called in. How long can it sit there? What's going to happen? Oh dear, oh bloody hell. Internet installation is beyond my capability. I call Malcolm. Malcolm knows how to do these things. Malcolm and his wife are in the process of adopting. Malcolm can't come round until Thursday. I go to the village shop, buy Kit Kats, enough to tide him over. Malcolm has been and gone. I call in on my way home. I should never have gone on this damn thing. My mother shouts from the kitchen, brings coffee, places the mugs on mats in Dad's room. I want to come off the internet. Why, Dad? It doesn't work. What doesn't work? I can't find you. What do you mean you can't find me? Malcolm found you. I showed him how to Google, type in my name. Why are there so many of you? I'm quite busy, Dad. We sit and have a Kit Kat with our coffee in the front room. Mum sits in her chair by the window. The nice young woman across the road has had an anonymous letter again, complaining about the state of her dustbins and the gravel on the pavement that apparently damages dogs' paws. My mother thinks it's the woman from the WI, the one with the purple coat and the dog. The phone rings. It's my sister. Dad and I go back to his room. His tall boy with his important papers, his dressing table, brush, comb, pipe in the top right drawer, dental fixative in the left, the wardrobe with his canvas rucksack on top, the holiday suitcases, and the 4 nearly finished Guardian quick crossword books that I bought because Mother won't let him do the ones in the paper. Once when I was helping him set up his new digital camera, we sat on the bed and took a photograph of ourselves in the dressing table mirror. Can we find my sister? We find her. She is busy too. I call in again on my way home. It doesn't work. What doesn't work? I can't find it. What? The place that we held, the tributary, the Alter Rhine. The Germans were on the other side. Tom, the newsagent, found it when we lived in Eldwick. I install Google Earth. First we find the bungalow, then we swoop along the Rhine, try to find the tributary. It was too difficult. Oh, bloody hell. We have a Kit Kat sitting on the bed. My father starts. Forgetting his stick, that effing stick my sister calls it, he goes to the spare room, comes back with blue flash, the story of an armoured regiment. He looks up the place name, the nearest village. We type it into Google Earth, sweep in, and there, just to the east, the tributary flows into the Rhine. My father wants to go in further, magnify the V of the promontory. Here it is. He points at a tiny white building. That's the farmhouse that the infantry held. The Rhine flows fast there, in places faster than the top speed of the water buffaloes. Trees slide forwards. The 4th Battalion Royal Tank Regiment will slip under the willows in the dead of night.
Thank you.
Got one tiny poem.
Yeah,
now.
the short one.
It's called I Can't Find You.
Me?
No, it's a poem.
I know.
I can't find you. Dad is looking on Google Earth. Dad, I say, I'm not that big.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. And that's from Mark Orange, available now at spmpublications.com. And we'll now have the second reading by Phil Vernon.
Thanks, Nnorom. Thanks, Anne. And just let me take this opportunity to say thanks to Mandy, thanks, Nnorom, thanks, Anne, thanks, Francis again. One of the nice things about this was the first things that the three of us did was buy each other's books, and I've really enjoyed reading Francis's poems, which are really detailed and textured, and Anne's poems, which have that sort of really great tension between the classification and the emotional, I suppose it is. And I'd also like just to do a shout out to the members of the Kent and Sussex Poetry Society who are attending. It's really great being a member of the society and having opportunities to read each other's poetry and talk about poetry and hear poetry once or twice a month with you, even during the lockdown over Zoom, so thanks. So I'm going to read 3 poems now, and they're lighter poems than the ones I read in the first segment. You'll be happy to hear probably. And they're all poems which draw on the natural world and actually gardens. The metaphorical utility of the natural world is always there for poets. The first one is called Mysterious Garden, and it's another sonnet. Mysterious Garden. That loosestrife overwhelms the rose in June. Which branches bow when wet? A secret silence when it snows. How birds change key before sunset. That leaves now green were apple red. Where wrens build nest behind the fern. Which clematis were velvet threads, and which were silk. All this we've learnt. And yet it's only as we turn the soil, and sow and thin and hoe, and tie the taller stems to stays, and coax the unforeseen and prune to let light in, we start to know what this year's garden wants to say. The second one is called Place, also a garden poem, and it has an epigram which is from the book of Job, Old Testament. But where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? So it's called Place. This garden breathes as sunset strokes the goldenrod and slides away. This place has known the touch of raindrop, breeze and gale, the sudden chill when crows call clouds, the sudden warmth when they disperse, the breath of ghosts when breezes fail. Has felt the weight of ice diminish, leaving crumbled stone, then heath, then grass, then trees. Has witnessed deer, then sheep, then horses graze. Lawns displace fields. Roads lead where paths once led, to bivouacs, then barns, then homes. Has heard the sound of children's games, of disputes, clashes, laughter, campfires, kitchens, idling cars, the quieter tones of love and tears, and parents pointing to the stars, has stood its ground, as shadows marked the years and seasons by the way they fell and waned or grew, and when or where they travelled from and to. And now, as fading summer falls on rose, anemone and goldenrod, the gardener's pride, if asked to weigh the worth of all it's held, this gentle place would likely say he could not tell. And maybe just before I read the last one, which is another shortish one, in answer to Mandy's question, just very briefly, I think what I was trying to do with this collection was in a way respond to Adorno's comment that writing poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric. And in that paper he wrote, in which that very dense and rather difficult to understand essay he wrote, in which that quote, from which that quote comes, he makes the much clearer comment that essentially all culture shares the guilt of its society. And because I'm trying to write what I regard as, in some respects, beautiful poetry, I think it's quite challenging to think about difficult aspects of life and modern life, and try to write beautiful poetry about those often quite ugly things. And that was the sort of challenge and the balance I was trying to get in the book. So this one's called Winter Gardens. And just as my last poem in the first segment was about lack of reconciliation, this is really a reconciliation poem about reconciliation. Winter Gardens. You see your gardens in the space between the plants. Pull every weed without a trace, lest it disturb the balance of your scheme. Deadhead each stem before its flower fades. Lift every labeled bulb to plant again, and prune your trees and shrubs as each dictates. I grow my plants so close they all complain they've insufficient room to breathe, or sun to drench their leaves, or share of summer rain. Yet young weeds grow to be what they become, and poppy stems and seed heads twist and dry, then rot when frost and winter rainfall come. I watched you tend your silence constantly, then found a careless way to nurture mine. We've made our different landscapes home, and still we touch each other's quiet awkwardly. But looking now, when winter's worked its spell of leveling, our gardens seem as one. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I just unmuted myself. Now, Phil, that was very good. There's this poem from Francis that I find very interesting. And I wonder how men feel about this poem. It's titled, She Muses on the Building of the Sky. The structuring of the sky happens amid great noise, and the noise is made by men, and the noise is called wisdom. The noise is the definition of wisdom. Women know the noise is not of their making because they are getting on with building the sky. Noise from the men tells of building methods and sky maintenance. The women pay attention to the sky and not the noise. Sometimes the men take a break from their noise to sneak a look at the women's methods. And then they praise the women for understanding methods so well. Sometimes the women take a spade to the men's heads for a bit of relief, but usually they do not have time. That is how the sky is built and maintained. I don't know, man. I love it. I love it. But men also get on with it. They do. We do. We get on with it. Okay. All right. We'll now go to our first prize winner, Francis. To do the last bit of reading before we have a bit of Q&A, if anybody has any questions for the poets. Francis.
Thank you. Thanks, Nnorom, for giving me an extra bit of publicity there.
Well,
I, like Anne, have got 2 poems to read in this section. A short one, like Anne, and a longer one. So I'll start with the short one. It's called When the Bees. It's a sort of an excuse for having a lot of weeds in my garden. Actually, it's deliberate. When the bees. That's not what I meant to say at all. I meant to say, when I used to teach poetry, one of the things you kind of emphasize is that each word must justify its existence. Don't just let yourself ramble on like I'm doing now. Make sure that each word in your poem has a reason for being there. And I don't always manage that myself, but I think I do in this one. When the bees. Ignoring garden law, I let weeds breed for how they billow their bombshell grace. And when the bees lug their lulling impossibilities from sneezeweed to honeywort to bold unlabeled bells that blow also in Chernobyl, in Fukushima, then I start to know in this walled elbow room how things might hold, given the touch and go. And this one is a little bit longer, and for this, I want to take you across the sea into the Mediterranean to the island of Crete. Another trick I learned from a poetry tutor on the island of Crete called Linda Chase, a lovely woman, an American woman. She was based in Manchester and tutored with Carol Ann Duffy in Manchester. And she sadly died a few years ago now. She it was who gave me confidence in my voice as a poet. And I want to dedicate this to her and remember her as I'm reading. One of her things was focus on something, go right into the essence of something and keep going and going and going and asking questions about that one thing, and you'll find you've gone quite far out as well. The goat bells. I want to know about the goat bells because their small, hollow knocking is in my head. I want to know if a bell might be worn by many goats in succession, if it might be generations, centuries old, and if a child in the village might wake to the very same music as her mother did, and her grandmother, and her great-grandmother. I want to know about the bell maker, hammering out the tin cup and hanging the tiny clapper. Did the bell maker test the bell for tone and timbre with a particular goat in mind? So that when you open your shutters and the light rushes in and you hear a near familiar tapping and talking, you can say, ah, my goat Mariah is there. And did the bell maker die long ago? And is their name remembered in the village? And is bell maker said along with the name? And is that name sometimes given to a new baby? Or are they disposable bells that arrive in large boxes all the way to the island from Athens or Shanghai? I want to know what a bell means to its goat. Do the bells at first drive the goats nearly mad? And do they in the end settle for this madness as they settle for the high winds and the worlds where their clever feet take them? And the sweet, still places they know, and the fragrant scrunch of time, and the daily giving of the blessing of their milk. And I want to know if at the last it is the bell's kiss on the air that betrays the goat to the man with the knife. For the bell sounds the goat, its toings and froings, its choices and changes, and the silence of the bell is the goat's musing and sleeping. I want to know about the goat bells, for their faint, hollow harmonies are knocking at the bowl of the mountains under the sun against the silvered pulse of the sea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. Right, we're going to have a little bit of interaction here. If anyone has any question for any of the poets, this is the time to ask. So if you can just let me know by chat, type your name there so I can find you and spotlight you to ask your question. Can I have some wine? Anyone? Okay. So it looks like we don't have any questions. So we can say that's the end of the evening.
I think George Miller wants to ask a question, or maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know.
Okay. Let me see, George. Okay, I got George Miller.
But he's muted.
Okay, no. George, can you unmute yourself?
I unmute myself, yes. Francis, thank you for the goat bells. I swear to you, it has been on my computer in a screen for years and years and years. I adore that poem. There's something about it where you're looking at something that is so mundane, so simple, and yet you're seeing greatness in it. It's like going into your garden, Francis, and seeing a dandelion growing and realizing that that dandelion is producing nectar for the bees first thing in the spring. Yes, there's something, it's finding the grandeur in simplicity. And this is the key of my artwork and your poetry. Bless you.
Right, thank you, George. Now for the poets, Mandy Pannett just wrote, I'd like to know how the poets chose their titles and covers. Francis?
My title is a little bit out of one of the poems towards the end. It's cunningly hidden, but it's a poem about about a thought process during which I'm watching the door to see if something is going to happen. And how I chose the cover, it was very easy. I asked my artist brother, Colin Corkey, I said, have you got any pictures of doors, any old paintings of a door? And he said, yeah, what about this one? And I said, yeah, that looks very good. I really like the way the door is open onto another door. And then right in the middle, just below the middle, there's a little sort of triangle of white light that's pointing towards the opening of the book, and it seemed to be just right. And I want to thank Nnorom for getting it appearing just right as well, because Colin sent lots of instructions about how he wanted it to be, and I had a few instructions as well. And I do love the cover. I said to somebody, it's a bit like a banana skin, that cover, tactically. You know how when you spread out a banana skin and stroke it, it's a lovely sort of feeling.
All right, and Francis, there's another question for you.
Oh.
This is from Annie Fisher. Annie says, I love the Goat Bell poem so much. I'd love to hear Francis say more about how she wrote it. Was it a real bell?
The Goat Bells. I wrote it sometime after I came back from Lutro, from Crete that time. And I found that the goat bells, it's true what I say in the poem. I want to know about the goat bells because their small, hollow knocking is in my head. And it was in my head. And I thought, I've got to do something about this small, hollow knocking that's in my head against the silvered pulse of the sea. I've just, and the words came. They came and they filled the page, and they filled half of another page as well. Is that enough, Annie? Or should I say more? Have I answered you?
Well, Annie, you can unmute yourself.
It's just such a gorgeous poem, Francis. I guess I just want to know, how do you do that, really? And I guess there's no answer.
I do the thing I'm good at, really, which is rambling on and on.
It's just superb, that one. I think it's, as George says, it's just so universal, the way it just opens out. And
it's a good trick, that, you see, when you're writing poetry, as George knows in his art as well. It's a good trick to really focus in and just say, oh, you've changed position on my screen, Annie. Yeah, to focus in.
Yeah.
And just keep going down the tunnel.
It's wonderful.
And it was, I'm very lucky because, you know, the more I thought about it, the more notions emerged to write about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more? No. All right.
Do you want us to explain our titles?
Oh yeah, I forgot. So we've had Francis. Now you tell us, how did you come about your title?
For me, well, the poem with that title came before the book with the title. I think I chose it partly because I thought it was an intriguing title for the book, because it existed already as the title for the poem. But like Mandy said, it does somehow, because it's a quote from Adorno with his challenge about whether it's okay to produce art in a modern society which is self-destructive and destructive of and barbarically destructive of people. And the way I often write poems is by I have an idea or a phrase sometimes which I kind of meditate on for sometimes a couple of years or longer before a poem comes. And that was one of them. I thought about it a lot over a long period of time. So it seemed right. And then the cover is interesting to me anyway, because the picture on the cover is by Paul Klee. And it's one of a series of prints he did called, I think it's called The Angelus. And Theodor Adorno, whose quote is the quote, Poetry After Auschwitz, was a very close friend of another German critic philosopher, Walter Benjamin. And there's another poem in the book, so Walter Benjamin had a copy of this print with him. And every time he moved around, he fled the Nazis and moved to Paris. He took this copy of this print with him, and he wrote about it and talked about it, and everyone knew that he loved it. And he wrote a famous essay in which he refers to what he calls the angel of history. And according to him, he sort of came up with the idea from looking at this picture. So I have a poem in the book about the angel of history. So I thought it was quite nice that Paul Clay's picture, which was one of the favorite pictures of one of the subjects of one of the poems in my book, who was also a friend and colleague of the person whose quote provides the title for the book. I thought it was a rather nice circularity. And if you followed that, you're cleverer than I am.
The same question for Anne.
Oh, so I have a poem in my book called Mock Orange, which doesn't read very well because you have to see it to really get it. But when I was little, I hated going to nursery school, but my mum felt I ought to go to sort of get me more sociable. And so she would trick me by getting me to go out into the garden to look at the flowers, and the minibus would come to take me to nursery school, and I would be thrown into the minibus crying my eyes out.
Oh, God.
And there was a mock orange bush just by the end of the drive. And for those of you who know mock orange, it's just a beautiful shrub and it smells beautiful. And as Mandy said in her review, she thought that was quite cruel. But there's a poem at the end of the book where mock orange is in charge of Linnaeus's collection. So it kind of all came together. So I just love mock orange, basically. And so the photograph is mock orange in grey, black and white tones, done by my friend Karen.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask the same question of all the three poets, because I'm going to spend the next year marketing these books seriously. So, but while I'm doing that, I want to know, what else are you working on? What's the next book, Francis? Are you working on something new?
I would have been, but this has taken up my time, and as you possibly know, I've been quite ill. So I do have some ideas. One idea is I do speak a few other languages, and one idea is to produce some poetry in French. I mean, I've got some already, and see if anybody in France might like them. I suppose Brexit will make that really easy for us, won't it?
Okay.
That's just one thing. Another thing that I'll just say, the book Watching the Door is a compilation of stuff that I wrote from about 50 years ago up to and including the present. I said to myself, why are you going on courses and making yourself write new poems when you've got so much old stuff? So Watching the Door contains a fraction of the old stuff, and I might just carry on hosing up some of the old stuff and redoing it, of course, and producing another book in that way. So that's two things that I'm thinking of.
Excellent. Good. Some question for Phil.
Well, I've got I have a collection which might come out at some point, which I think I've just stopped being able to see. It's called Watching the Moon Landing, and it's that's just my mock-up as the cover. I hasten to add, but it is possible that it's going to come. It's probable that it's going to come out next year, sometime mid next year, and it's a collection of poems about. I'm very interested in. Well, we all are. I'm very interested in the connections that across time and space, and the poem Watching the Moon Landing is a strange poem, which is a poem which is actually written by someone as if they're watching Christopher Columbus landing in the West Indies on television in Spain. And so it kind of characterizes that time and space connections idea. But I have to say that no one I've ever shown the poem to has ever understood it. So, I've always had to explain what it's about. So there we go.
Okay. And Anne?
Well, I seem to have accidentally written about 100 pages of poetry about rockall and related issues. For those of you who, I mean, if you don't know what Rockall is, Google it. It's a ridiculous lump of rock about 250 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of west coast of Scotland. And there's so much stuff about Rockall. I want to be virtual poet in residence. I might actually try to be poet in residence fleetingly, but it's only 60 feet above sea level and it goes under sometimes and I get seasick.
That's pretty brave.
Okay. I think that's it. That's it for the evening. I've really had a lovely time. There's Sam Smith, the journal. Sam, do you have anything to say to us?
I think he's on mute.
Okay, I can unmute him.
You're like a sort of Zoom maestro here, Nnorom. Like an orchestra conductor.
I'm learning. Okay. I think he's unmuted now. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't really know what to say, except it was a very nice evening. Thank you very much. Of course, I enjoy Frances' work because I know Frances so well. I'd like to have heard her read the poem about Bob meeting her at the airport. It's one of my favorites, but
about what?
I've got time for that. The one where you meet Bob, but Bob meets you at the airport.
That was, I was going to read that, but there wasn't time.
Shame.
Why don't you read it?
Particularly like.
What now?
Go ahead, read it now. Yes.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I'm serious. That's how we'll end the night. You read that and we'll close the night.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't know that you two guys knew each other, but I suppose all you editors are in the same boat.
We're all sinking, Frances. We're sinking.
I know that.
Feeling round Rockall.
What's this poem called? Oh yes, Racing Towards Orion, that one.
That's it.
Okay.
This is a sonnet. Well, looks like a sonnet anyway. The purists might say it's not quite a sonnet. Yeah, it is a sonnet. It rhymes. It's got a volta in the right place. It was written some years ago when I was coming back from, I like to think of myself as a traveler, and I don't get to travel as much these days as I would like to. So I had gone somewhere in Eastern Europe, I think, and I was snowed up and couldn't get back. And it was pre-mobile phone days. So Robert, my houseboy, was waiting for me at Bristol Airport. Stop laughing, Sam. And I arrived. It's called Racing Towards Orion for Robert. Hold on just a sec. Rob, this one has just been requested. Come back. Racing Towards Orion for Robert. We're driving out into the brittle night, heading for home at last. I'd been delayed, snowed up, missed my connections. You had stayed all day at the airport, meeting every flight until I came, and there you were, just right, solid to the touch, a little disarrayed with waiting, a fortune's parking paid. We're on the road with bed and sleep in sight. With the children, through binoculars, we saw peaks and craters on a wide, pellucid moon, and Venus rising in the afternoon. Now Orion strides the hills ahead to draw us westward into Devon, to the sea. Your own bright star, closer than ever to me.
Thank you very much.
Lovely.
And thank you everyone for joining us for this evening of poetry. And like I was telling Phil earlier this evening when we had a chat, we're going to have another one in the new year sometime in the first quarter of 2021, definitely. And what I have in my head is to bring together all the winners of our poetry book competitions from 2015 till now and have everyone in one big party. And it will be interesting if we do it on Zoom, because we're talking about some of our winners from outside who don't live in the UK. Peter Oram, our very first winner, lives in Germany. And then we've got Jude Neal, who's splendid in his silence, won the second prize, in our second series. And she's a Canadian musician and poet. So we'll have her from Canada. And then Abigail Zammit is, she will be writing in, or I don't know where she is right now, but she travels a lot. But the last time we spoke, she was somewhere in New York, but I think that she lives in Malta. She comes from Malta. So if she's in Malta at that time, that would be great. So we'll have all these different artists from different parts of the world come down and do poetry. And we'll make it even more interesting because it's going to be an evening of poetry and music. In the past, when we've done live events, we've had Mandy's husband, also named Phil, who used to bring his band, So when we went around doing our book launches everywhere, Phil's band will be there playing live music in between readings. Really, really special. So I'm hoping to have something like that in the first quarter of 2021. So keep writing, keep enjoying poetry, and God bless you. Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Nnorom.
Yeah, this event is recorded, so I'm going to put it up on YouTube, and then I'll send out the links if any of your friends want to enjoy the evening in their own time. All right. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Francis.
Bye.